Now that we've defined the elements of diffusion, let's talk about the actual process. So this is labeled the innovation decision process, and it has a number of steps. But this process is essentially an information seeking and information processing activity, meaning we are looking for information and considering that information. This assumes that the individual is motivated, that they have some sort of motivation to do this, to work through this process, and it's typically to reduce uncertainty about the advantages and disadvantages of an innovation. So the innovation may be something that you are choosing to adopt. It could also be something that you are being forced to adopt. So there's different types of decisions in this model. But the essence of this diffusion process is that information exchange of seeking information and processing it and maybe going back and getting more. And that requires communication. And that helps underscore why this theory is applied quite frequently in communications research. So this innovation diffusion process is a 5-stage process. And while this figure is showing that it is linear, it's not always. Like sometimes you might get stuck in this phase, or you might move to this phase and then decide that you're not going to keep using the innovation. So I have another figure that better represents that more complicated look. But I want to talk through each of these stages in the process. So the first one is the knowledge stage. And this begins when an individual is exposed to an innovation's existence and gains understanding of how it functions. And I hope you'll agree that if you don't even know about an innovation, you cannot start this process. So this is where you start. You have to at least recognize that there is an innovation and start to understand what that means. Sometimes you might question what comes first, the need for an innovation or awareness of the innovation. And sometimes marketers help us create a need for an innovation, and then other times we have a need and we need to go find something to solve the problem. So the exposure will have little effect unless the innovation is perceived as relevant. So we're bombarded with information, information overload, and unless we can see that the innovation is relevant to us, we're just going to keep moving on. So as a communicator, your role might be to help make sure, one, that your information is going to the right people, and two, that when they see it, they can find some personal relevance to it. And again, this definition goes on to describe that it needs to be relevant to our needs and consistent with our attitudes and beliefs. So we'll be talking about theories that look at the social psychology and evaluating what we already think we know or believe or have opinions about certain issues, topics, innovations, and how that would influence our response to them. So I want you to go back to the reading and identify what variables the authors are using to explore the knowledge stage of this theory. So again, theories are used to help identify variables and explain relationships between those concepts. So you can pause the video. I'm going to keep on going, but I hope that you'll take the time to kind of go back and see, okay, in that study that I asked you to read, how did they explore this knowledge stage? All right, so once you've moved past knowledge, you're into the persuasion stage. So you know about it, and now you're starting to show more interest, and you're seeking out additional information about the innovation. So you're starting to ask more specific details, starting to consider more specific information, and this helps you form a favorable or unfavorable attitude toward the innovation. So you might never go past this stage. You might decide, well, we're going to move past this stage because you have to make a decision, but your attitudes are being formed, and those are your beliefs about an object that predisposes your actions. So many theories posit that the attitude is prior to any sort of action, that you have to form an attitude in order to then have a response. So again, go back to the reading and look at what variables did the authors use to explore the persuasion stage. And they did. So there's a couple variables that they pointed out that said this is how we're going to determine if someone is in this stage and what information they're considering. So the next stage that I think we all get to is the decision stage. And we may get here very quickly. We may also take a long time to reach this stage. The individual in this stage is engaging in activities that lead to a choice to adopt or reject an innovation. So I have this figure that shows that maybe you're going to decide to keep moving forward with the innovation, and then maybe you're going to stay put or decide to go the other way. So adoption is the decision to make full use of the innovation. The rejection is you decided not to. And we have that choice sometimes on certain innovations about do we want to put them into practice or not. A really important piece of this decision stage is trialability. We're going to talk about the attributes of an innovation in just a few moments. But I like to point this out because typically as a communicator, if you can help facilitate trialability, you can help people move past this decision stage. And we'll come back and talk about what trialability is. So again, final one, in the reading, the authors talk about variables they use to explore the decision stage. So go back and look at how they're using certain concepts to help determine how people are responding to the knowledge and persuasion and entering this decision stage. So this is, as promised, this is the more complicated model that looks at these 5 stages in the process. And you can see here at the decision stage, there is that decision to adopt or reject. And you can always decide to, later adopt or to discontinue. And there's a little more complication here. But this also demonstrates that communication channels are used at all stages to influence this process. So let's move on to talking about these final 2 stages. So the implementation stage is when you've made the decision to use the innovation, and now you're going to put it into use. And it says new idea. It could be a new object, a new tool. So I have this picture of an electronic vehicle because for some families, they are moving into this implementation stage of making the decision to adopt this innovation and are trying it out. So this stage ends when the new idea becomes institutionalized as a part of the adopter's operations. So in 10, 15, 20 years, will this become the new normal? And if so, then it's no longer innovative. It's just part of our normal operations. The final stage is confirmation. And this is when you seek reinforcement of a decision you've already made. And in doing so, you may reverse the decision if you come to some conflicting messages. You may decide that this wasn't the right idea. And when that happens, you might experience dissonance. And that's it. We're going to talk more about dissonance this semester, but this is this internal disequilibrium. It's this uncomfortable state of mind that you always want to try to reduce or eliminate. This confirmation stage, you could work through this and, confirm to keep the innovation, or you could discontinue it. And that's your decision to reject the innovation after you've previously adopted it. So maybe you tried something new, it didn't work, and so you're going to discontinue it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this concept, but I do want to recognize that the diffusion of innovations does categorize people based on innovativeness. And a lot of this has to do with the amount of time it takes you to decide to adopt something. And you can see by this bell curve that most people are in this majority area, either early or late majority. But we do have these innovators out here. They're the first ones to adopt. They're often venturesome. Then we have early adopters who are decisive. They waited till they got a little more information, but then made a decision to adopt. Then we have the folks who are more deliberate. and then more skeptical on the late majority. And then laggards are sometimes considered traditionalists. They're very reluctant to ever innovate or try something new. And they're, down here at the end of the bell curve. I would argue that depending if what the innovation is really determines your innovativeness. There's some innovations that I might get out right ahead and adopt quickly. And then there's others that I'm really dragging my feet on. And I bet you can see that in your own practices as well.